Hello again. Welcome to an episode of QQ, Quality Control, from Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Beside me is Torrin McLaughlin.
Good morning.
And Sue-Lin Park.
Hi.
Today we are going to be having a spoiler-ridden discussion of the tale of Princess Kaguya. Sue's going to start us off right off the top. Again, spoilers. Right off the top with some basic information.
It was directed by Isao Takahata, who also directed Pompoko. It came out in 1994, and Grave of the Fireflies. He is also, I would say, he's a very highly considered, whatever you want to call it, because I've seen his TV series. It's Heidi, a girl from Alps, and he also directed a couple episodes of Future Boy Conan, and I know some of you might understand what that means.
It might have more cultural relevance or sort of impact.
Yeah. For those who don't know,
Korea,
he's also co-founder of Studio Ghibli and does less films than Hayao Miyazaki over the course of Studio Ghibli's. But now, at the end of the studio, basically he's come back after 14 years to do this one for us.
Yeah. You want to give us a quick synopsis, Storm?
Yeah, sure. It's basically follows a bamboo cutter who discovers a princess embedded in a stalk of bamboo. It turns out that the princess is from the moon, where there's a separate culture and civilization, and that she's being sent there for some purpose. We never really find out what that is. Doesn't matter. It's in the traditional tale. Who gives a crap? I'll try not to swear as much this time. That was a complaint from last episode. Anyway, so the movie details basically the bamboo cutter moves the princess to the capital because he feels it's befitting of her noble spirit, sort of thing, and she struggles to accept this. She wants to get back to her home in nature and with her sort of folky, rustic friends and the man that we think she loves and that sort of thing. So she's split psychologically, and she also has to deal with a number of noble suitors, including the emperor. She gives them a number of impossible tasks, and they try to deceive her. She sees through all of it, and eventually she must return to the people of the moon because we learned that she's cried out in, agony sort of thing, that she hates her situation here, basically. She does it and has to leave her parents, and then she goes back to the people of the moon.
Yep.
That's it.
That's essentially the synopsis, or I guess the summary. Very quickly, I hope... if you listen to that, then you basically know the entire story. But in the review that we had just done, we each gave the film a grade. I gave it a C, Sue gave it a C, Torrin gave it a C.
60.
Sorry, 60, which we're translating into the letter grade system, which is a C. Not even a C plus, as he says it. And I think we can just go sort of right into a discussion of it.
I was thinking that we could probably get right into discussing the film.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Wonderful. So what was... We were talking about a lot of the sort of structural flaws that we believe we saw in the film. Torrin, why don't you sort of start us off on what you believe is, I guess, some of the flaws that we did see?
Well, I think we all agree that the first 20 to 25 minutes or so, I wasn't really paying attention. You're not supposed to look at your phones in the movie theater, you bastards. Sorry. Nobody did that, actually. There were like 8 people at the film that when I saw it. And this was the only film in Vancouver, which is a pretty large city, that was actually showing this as part of the Vancouver International Film Festival, and was shown at sort of an art house. I think it's Van City Theatre.
Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting because when Sue and I saw it, the evening before, because we saw it at 8:40 on a Wednesday night. It was fairly full. It might have been almost a full house. And actually, what's interesting is the difference between how Sue and I saw it and how Torrin saw it was that Sue and I saw it with Japanese voice track and English subtitles, and
I saw the English dub with familiar actors like, I think, James Caan, who does a ton of Studio Ghibli stuff, and then a few female leads that do the same stuff. Oh yeah,
Darren Criss, who's from Glee and a Harry Potter musical.
There you go. Anyway, I think I probably would have preferred to see it in the Japanese with subtitles and that sort of thing. There are a few melody things that are very important to the story structure and to the princess's identification on Earth and with her people from the moon. She sings a tale about. She sings a song about bugs and beasts and birds, and how they teach people, and it's nostalgic tale sort of thing. And then she also adds a verse that none of her friends have heard to this like little folk rhyme about her connection to the moon land, basically. And those things sort of fell flat with the English dubs. I think the Japanese would have been more enchanting.
I thought those moments. I mean, Sue's a fairly adept, actually quite adept, musically inclined person. But I thought, for the most part, it was rather enchanting. The music, but I was curious. Was it the actors singing, or was it just sort of the clunky, sort of rhythmic aspect of the
like
English
even when
words?
we translate haiku to English, we say like, oh, you've got to have 757 or 575. So I can't remember which.
575.
Yeah, those don't actually correspond to like the syllabic. Like this, our syllables do not correspond to what in Japanese is called. I think it starts with an O. Anyway, because the way that we do vowels and that sort of thing is different. So the pacing of the languages never really meets up very well, and even translating how the syllables work in both languages is a difficult thing for like a poetic process that's been established for hundreds and hundreds of years, you know. So in the film, it didn't overcome that. Definitely did not. It made the melody sort of clunky, and that's basically.
I actually don't know if that like melody was actually a folk song that everybody kind of knows, or if they made it up or whatever. But like, there's weirdness in like listening to, even we were talking about operas beforehand, like before we started recording, but listening Les Miserables in English and listening to that in Korean translation is kind of, it's very different. It's because well, I understand both languages, so like I think I understand like what is missing in the translation and what is added and stuff. So there must have been stuff like that happening, because it wasn't English that was like that the composer or whatever kept in mind when they were originally creating the piece.
I mean, I think this is going to start to get a little bit away from the discussion of the film itself, but I do think with sort of foreign films, and like films like Studio Ghibli films, the discussion between, you know, subs versus dubs, as Tor likes to call it, and some people call me like a purist or just like a snob when I say I don't ever want to see a film in English dub. And it's a big part of it for me personally is because I want to see it as the filmmakers intended. And languages are just inherently different. And yes, some languages come from other ones, or like, you know, sprung up from other languages. But it's just like I speak English. I'm terrible with every other language. And if I direct a film, I have a very clear intention with the actor to come up with, you know, how a particular scene is supposed to play and all that stuff. And if all of a sudden I have some other person who is, I don't even know how, I'm not exactly sure how they do it, but if it's me being like, okay, now someone has to sort of dub it in Japanese, I don't know if the acting's good or not. I just know I don't. And so it really, I think, affects the integrity of the film, especially in terms of the acting and all that sort of stuff.
Or and maybe the intentions might be different. Like, they might not get the right, the original thought that the director had in mind in terms of figuring out what the characters want and stuff. Maybe a little bit different. I don't know who was in charge of the recordings of the American actors, but they're, you know, they're not necessarily bad actors, but it just could translate into something different than the original interpretation.
I think they do use the same actors for a lot of Studio Ghibli films, and even probably for the past films that Isao Takahata did, like Grave of the Fireflies might have been the same actors, I'm not sure. I know he used James Caan fairly often. So they probably know the process, and the translation team is probably similar or the same for a lot of these films and that sort of thing. But I think especially with this film, because it's adapted from what is apparently supposed to be the oldest Japanese folktale sort of thing, whereas other Studio Ghibli films like Grave of the Fireflies is about World War II. It's like more contemporary, a more Western sort of looking or Western oriented tale. On this film particularly, we lose a lot, I think, and I was yearning for the Japanese because it seemed just to be probably a more authentic telling, you know?
Yeah, so go see it in subs or whatever movie you're watching. Just watch it in its original language.
Unless
you can read.
you're with children.
Yeah, and see, I mean, like, yeah, if you're getting your kids into, like, if you have kids and you're watching
Teach them to read.
Yeah, teach them to read. Anyways, going back to the film, a big part, a big issue for me was it, from my understanding and story structure, generally what you try and do is the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the film, whatever you present to the audience, you naturally give them a question that they have. It's for Birdman, that a film that we saw recently, I'm not going to spoil anything, but you just sort of, the question you're sort of given is like, is this play going to go off? Is it going to work? Or is it just going to, destroy and it's going to explode everywhere and all that sort of stuff, metaphorically? And then you go through the whole film, and each moment or event sort of culminates and builds into sort of the climax, which answers the question of whether the play goes off and how does it affect him and all that sort of stuff. Okay, great. That's a story structure that has sort of a sense of direction to it. With this film, he finds the little tiny princess that's literally like the size of his palm, and okay, that's different, that's unique. And a lot of Studio Ghibli films, part of the reason why they're so interesting is because they have that element of magic. But it didn't. The beginning of the film, I felt, didn't ask the question, where is she from, why is she here, all that sort of stuff. The first 20-25 minutes, which are, I think, easily the strongest aspect of this film, they present the questions of, like, how is she going to adapt with her sort of rapidly growing nature, like, how is she going to make friends, are people going to treat her differently, is she going to learn as quickly, and it's just all these. It was very built on like how is she going to adapt to that particular problem, not why does she have it and where is she from. And yet in the third act, the second act is just a mess. But like the second act, she stops growing, right? Like it's
right.
The
she
magic
just
disappears.
A plateau, and she's sort of like
and it doesn't give a reason.
Adult, and it just ends there.
Yeah, and it doesn't give us a reason why she stopped growing. And then in the third act, all of a sudden out of nowhere, she starts crying when she sees the moon after the emperor touches, like gives her a hug or whatever, and then all of a sudden she looks at the moon and starts crying, and then you realize that she's from the moon, and all of a sudden the whole big thing is like, oh no, okay, she's from the moon, will she be able to stay here? But the question is like, I didn't care about like whether she was from the moon and why she was sent here and all that sort of stuff. They didn't present me, they sort of didn't taunt me with that question or go like, this is the thing that we're going to consider. And it's just sort of, that was like, it blew its load on the whole like climax on those questions when I didn't care, and it set me up for a completely different question. And that's why I feel like story structures that are not, that have that sense of direction, that's where those issues arise from.
I think that's sort of uncharacteristic of Studio Ghibli films generally too, because the magic is always sort of just given. And that is part of what's so exhilarating about them, is they just go with it, like Howl's Moving Castle sort of thing is moves entirely on magic sort of thing. And there are these sort of dream sequence transformations that he goes through in the real world and in his psyche in Howl's Moving Castle that you don't pause to consider why they work, they just do sort of thing. And this film is actually hung up on its internal like technical dynamics in that way. It comes from the folktale, which I briefly read the wiki on, and it as well sort of just like focuses very much on she's got to go back to the moon, and that's sort of her tragedy, is she only spends a short time here. And if that's supposed to be significant in a broader context of like our all of our time here on Earth is limited sort of thing, and we must all eventually leave the people we love, and for accelerated growth is supposed to sort of symbolize all of our ephemerality in growth, then it sort of is continuous and makes cogent good sense sort of thing to introduce her rapid growth and her struggle with that at the beginning, and then just to like have her leave at the end. Like thematically it sort of works, but at the same time when they get hung up on how the magic works and how, I don't know, they just didn't do it well. They really didn't. And like the whole suitor plot in the middle, coming between these sort of two movements where she's found and grows rapidly and then must leave really immediately too near the end. The suitor plot does not connect them in any really in any good way.
It's the fact that I don't okay. So it's like there's one side of it where I felt like the filmmaker was trying to just take whatever is in the folklore and directly put it into the film with like him trying to connect the dots or whatever, because when I read the wiki with you, it didn't really feel like it was necessary for it to have those like connect the dots in between these things that happened, because it's a folklore. Like, it is supposed to be a folklore. It's a tale, and it's like, it's probably seen to people by like books normally, and you just sort of accept that that is a story. Except in a film, like in the realm of the film, it kind of has to have those, like you said, like those questions. You need to set up the audience to something. Otherwise, in third act, when I'm introduced with a whole new idea, I'm like, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And like, what is gonna happen to the thing that I was caring about from the first act or the second act? Like for the Stemaru Nichan, like what's gonna happen with him? Or like, are they gonna end up together? Apparently not. And then the second one is like, what is gonna happen to the suitors? Like, cause the Emperor seemed pretty like persistent on the fact that he was going to make her his or whatever, and I found that scene very horrifying.
Right.
Yeah. Like, and that there was like nothing. She just took off, and okay, like that is a big deal. And the thing that got to me in the very good sense was the fact that she had to leave her parents, where like the parents who everything that they did was for her, like for their daughter, and that was sad, but that wasn't the focus of the story, like for the most part, you know.
Yeah, and it's just, it felt like this had a whole bunch of false starts. Like, one of these, I thought they were going to start to build sort of the, I'm okay with Studio Ghibli sort of just wandering around and showing us cute things and making us feel safe and like, just, you know, show us like cool magic stuff, right? Like, okay, that's cool. Studio films do that. Studio Ghibli films do that. But I thought it was going to start sort of the main conflict when it said, oh, I don't know how to pronounce the boy's name. How do you pronounce it? That guy. Well, because it was showing that they had a very strong connection, and like, the princess was saying like, you know, I'm going to be here forever and all that sort of stuff. They had a very nice moment, and the boy said that, he goes, I just feel like you're going to outgrow us and then just leave us forever. And I was like, okay. And then like, boom, as soon as, oh, that was a little loud, sorry guys. Like, boom, all of a sudden she comes home and doesn't even get to like pack her clothes, and her father is coming back from the capital after he left to build like the palace or whatever, and she just has to leave. And I was like,
they don't get to make pheasant stew.
Yeah, like, yeah, exactly. the pheasant stew. And I thought, okay, cool. So they've created the conflict of, will they meet again? Will they, like, you know, will they get together? And the film like sort of ever so slightly touches on it briefly in like very small moments, and like when it's hinted that she is becoming of age and all that sort of stuff, and they have to have this like banquet. It's hinted like, oh, finally she gets to invite her friends, and then her father says, no, I'm not going to let you. It's weird. Like,
and then they drop that tension almost completely after that.
Yeah,
And that's probably like the last mention of like her past life with her friends from the country, sort of thing, for a very long time, and you forget about that, and then they reintroduce it when Stemaru and two other, you know, of his friends are found stealing. He's stealing a chicken, you know, in the street, and she, her carriage goes by him, and she sees him, and she just calls his name a bunch of times, and it's like, oh, that's tragic, but you don't really give a shit because they don't interact hardly at all in that moment. He just gets beat up, and you're like, oh, that sucks. And then she doesn't seem to care about it anymore after that.
Well, the thing, I did kind of understand, like, the I don't know. She just seemed depressed to me. And then, okay, now really. I will say, there is nothing cute about Mononoke Hime. There's nothing cute about it. Just because you said that Studio Ghibli's just sort of like show us cute things as we go along in the random story. It's like, oh, here's this, here's that. The thing that I was kind of confused about is the fact that, okay, so the tale is about her. So I guess she is sort of supposed to be the protagonist, except we were seeing that through the father's eyes in the first act. For me, I thought we were, like, because he's the one who discovers her, and he's the one who's, like, so strong, and, like, he almost, like, fights with those kids who's calling her Dakenoko, who's, like, the little bamboo or whatever. And he's like, no, she's a princess, and he's, like, yelling at the kids, and that kind of made me feel like he's a very strong character that is going to probably affect her in a lot of the ways, which, like, he does, except we weren't really seeing her through his eyes anymore in the second act, which, like, I think was why the flow was kind of interrupted, and then it changed into something else, and then later on it changes into, like, her and just completely, and I don't think it was, like, fully her POV either by the end, which was confusing. It's like we just lost the eyes that we were seeing this tale through, and, like, how, you know, later on, like, how are we supposed to follow, like, how are we supposed to see her, you know?
Sorry, if I just want to say, it is, like, the original tale is the bamboo cutters, I think it's the tale of the bamboo cutter, actually, just straight up. The original Japanese, like, 10th century or whatever it is tale. That seems too late, though, to be, like, the oldest extant. Anyway. But, yeah. There's not as much about him as you expect, and he sort of becomes very flat and one-dimensional, even though the conceit is supposed to be that when he introduces her to the city, that she's, like, he's doing it for her sake because he believes that she has a noble spirit, sort of thing, and so, like, his misguided attempts, as we see through her eyes, misguided sort of thing, because they don't, you know, allow her to express herself or to really go after what she loves in the city. I don't know, he becomes a perpetrator, and I don't think that we're ever supposed to not be sympathetic with him, because then at the end we're supposed to be very sad for him that she's got to leave again. And it has, you know, the film, with her accelerated growth and that sort of thing, you often hear parents in the real world say, like, oh my god, I remember just yesterday you were like, I was bouncing you on my knee, sort of thing, and it must be a tragic thing. I know, like, time is already going fast for me. You know? So I think that, I don't know. I expected more out of his character, more about his character throughout the film, that it didn't deliver after that first section.
Well, like, the thing that I thought was really odd or sad about the father character, and, like, and sort of the main character as well, is, like, there were just moments when I felt like the characters were doing what the writer wanted them to do, not because it was, like, the best for that character. And, like, if we treated them as, like, the most intelligent, logical person they could be, like, it's like watching a character going into a dark room, being like, hello, is there a monster in here, in a horror film? Like, you know, like, an intelligent person would not be going like, hey, dark room, all my friends have been killed off, let's go, and, like, into that room. I don't like films like that where the characters suddenly just lose all sense of logic and then do what is necessary for what the writer wants. And with the, like...
But those are more spectacle with the gore and the actual, like, fearful moments where the, boom, like, boom, 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 you know, that's what those movies are all about.
Yeah, but I mean, like, even, like, going on a very brief tangent, which will come back to my point, but, like, even Breaking Bad, part of the reason why it's so awesome is that character, at least for me, was always 10 steps ahead of me, even though I was watching it through his eyes. He was always far smarter than me. Walter White, yes. But going back to my point with the father, it's like, I thought he was a very interesting character, and, like, you could see he had passion for this little child, to the point where it was sort of, like, insane, crying, like, no, princess, come to me, come to me. And then, yet, like, as soon as he got, like, the gold, and, like, he went to the palace, and then he was, like, taking the girl. It's like he had no sympathy for her at all. Like, you would think, I don't know where this obsession, like, she has to be a princess, comes from. And, like, okay, if it comes from a sense of love for her, then why does she goes, like, no, you're not allowed to say hello to your friends, nothing at all. I mean, like, what is the palace, where is the palace gonna, like, grow legs and disappear? I mean, it seemed, and then, like, throughout the film, he was always doing things that was obviously very clearly against sort of the wishes of his daughter, that wish at the end he says that he loves her like no other, and it seems like there wasn't a very strong reason that he does this, other than he wants the best life for her, But like even if the mother can see that she's upset, and the father is supposed to like because they fight over her at the beginning, right? Like it just feels like it was the father very conveniently forgot how to read his daughter.
I actually disagree with that. I think he's the only one who actually has a very clear sense of want, like the motivation behind all his actions is for her daughter, like, and his daughter actually doesn't. I don't know what her motivation is, but the thing. Okay, so I will agree with you in the fact that he does lose the sense of which is like the typical thing that you see in a lot of stories. It's like the parent or somebody who like is motivated to do a certain thing, or like eventually is like meets a doom at the end because he was like too focused on that thing that he didn't care about anything else but that, you know, like, so he was kind of going through that, except I kind of wanted to see a bit of a redeem at the end where he was like, oh, what have I done? And now like his daughter's going away, probably the one thing that like matters to him the most, which is probably his daughter. And I understood the fact that she is not a normally born person. Like if your daughter it's like popped out of a bamboo,
found her under a rock,
and like or popped out of bamboo, and then like the bamboo forest gave you gold and all that stuff, and like the fabric or whatever. I understand why he was like, I need to make her into a princess because
the whole thing
she cannot
leave.
let me finish.
No,
she
no,
cannot.
I'm saying the thing is I'm not disagreeing with you that his want is very clear. It's why, and like, or why is he?
No, see, that's why I'm getting to the why is because he who is leading a very simple life in the forest, in the dingy little house, and they are eating roots, like the neighbors are eating like roots and all that stuff. He probably realized that for his daughter, this is not the life because she was born from such a special thing, and the forest itself, where she was born from, is like giving him such special things that he probably have never seen in his entire life. So that is probably why he was like, I'm going to go to the city, which like for a simple person who is living like a peasant's life, I guess, is probably the most noble thing, even though in our contemporary lives we know that it is to be free and like to be able to explore all these things, but for him it was probably to be at the highest level of the hierarchy, and to go and make her actually into a princess, because that is what is the most valuable thing, you know, in that society. And so that's why I understood his like reasons why he had to do that for her, except it kind of lost its explaining as to why he does that. Like I kind of wanted to see more like a struggle between like, okay, this is what I want for her. Like I wanted to see more of a conflict between the two, like between the princess and him, or like between princess's mom especially, oh my god, and him, because they have the same intentions, but his mom or her mom obviously saw that this is not affecting her daughter in the right ways. Like why didn't she like go and
right, her mom gardens to cope with it, sort of thing, and it's like they share that garden space, you know? But it is sort of a passive thing. And the very interesting thing to reorient this just a little bit is that the original legend, they don't move to the city. The father never makes that decision. It's actually the princess's beauty alone and the reputation of it that draws the suitors out to the country, sort of thing, to their house. At least on the wiki page. You know, there might be other adaptations where this happens. And I felt like questioning the reasons why to make that plot shift, it's like it sort of politicizes it. And we're talking about the father-daughter relationships in ways that's like, okay, I want to see each of their reasons economically, sort of like you talking about the father and that sort of thing. And the ways that people act around the people that they love, like outside of the people that they love, and make mistakes and that sort of thing, and sort of it's like a tragedy of parents and of children, right? And sort of a failure to communicate needs and desires appropriately. That sort of move to the city helps the film highlight, so that might be a strength. At the same time, it was really frustrated sometimes seeing the conflict, right? Because she just sort of does passively accept. her father's will and says her one trick sort of to get out of it to protect herself is to give the suitors impossible tasks, or so she thinks basically, so that she will never actually be successfully courted, despite her father's playing the game as best he can in the best way that he thinks possible for his daughter, sort of thing, to advance her station. I don't know.
I think that's why he is sort of like even more frustrating to us. Like his decisions are more frustrating to us than it could have been if she like fought back. Because, like, she takes it, and we're all thinking, like, why are you taking... Well, go communicate to your father.
Well, like, I feel like it's probably part of it's just a cultural thing, and, like, this is also sort of a piece that is older, right? It's much older, right? But I guess, the long spiel that we had there, all I was really wishing from the father, or I guess the writing, is just sort of a reason why he was so blind to... the actual needs
so to the blindness.
Right? And it's like, I'm perfectly fine with the father. I mean, you see it in so many films. I'm perfectly fine with the father being like that, and I don't think the film could actually continue forward if he wasn't. But it's just sort of, I wish there was a reason why he was so blind to it. And, like, even at the end, when he's like, I'll protect you from the moon people, they won't take me. It's never like, he doesn't even say, like, I will protect you so that you may do the things that you want to. Or, like, so that you can be happy for just a little bit longer. It's, I want you, you have to stay. And it's
right,
just like...
I'll protect you to keep you here. It's a selfish thing more.
Yeah, that actually, like, sort of... Well, that idea of, like, him bringing the guards to protect her sort of broke my heart in the sense that, like, that is the thing that he wants, like, to protect her. I guess, in certain lenses, like, he is selfish in doing so and whatever. And I think, in the original story, apparently in the wiki, which... like, may have a different version, is that it's the emperor who sends the guards, and not the father. So I think the filmmaker kind of, like, decided, okay, the father is going to have some kind of a role in this story throughout the entire film, except that wasn't, I think that was also, like, pulled away because of him trying to put in all these elements into the story, and instead of focusing on the one thing that could have been the most, or not the most interesting, but like if he had focused on one conflict, it might have been easier for us to follow the entire story. Like that fine balance between, is this an adaptation or is this like flat out you're just putting all the stories in the book into the film itself.
Because the father becomes a bit of a machine, and he just does things that you understand. He's trying to advance their station. He's trying to do the best for their family and the princess's reputation that he can, and to bring in suitors and that sort of thing, and bring in somebody to have her named in like the noble tradition, are all things that are expected, and we have no problem seeing that. It's not out of character or anything like that. We just get none of the internal reasoning behind that, right? We get none of the, like, does he struggle with these decisions? Like, how does he actually see his daughter? Does he,
What's his save the cat moment after he has turned into that
so just
materialistic...
Just for those who don't know what a save the cat moment is that...
What is a save the cat moment, Paul?
Save the cat moment is, there are a lot of writing gurus that believe that that you can have a character that's mean, cruel, seems insensitive, what have you, as long as you have just a single moment that shows, like, look, this person has some sort of element of kindness to them, or some sort of internal engine that is running on some sort of...
You can sympathize with them for a minute.
Yeah,
motivations, right? Or you can sympathize with, like, if it's somebody who is born into abject poverty, why they place so much emphasis on, getting more money in their life, or why they're, feel like that.
Yeah,
and as an example, I'm trying to understand. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and it's like one of the simplest, most popular ideas, I guess, is literally like a character, who, a little child that beats up other kids or whatever, or steals their candy. Before he does all that, he goes and literally saves a cat from a tree or a burning home or whatever, and it's just sort of gives you a reason to, like, okay, he's mean, but the reason he's mean is because he doesn't have any friends or whatever, right? And it's just save the cat moments.
It's like it helps the audience kind of root for him, or like not root for, but like follow the character without thinking that character just is like the most horrible thing ever. Like you kind of empathize.
But see, on the same token, I feel like he does have some sort of like save the cat moment in terms of like at the beginning when he just shows just how thoroughly he loves this little tree person.
I know he does. I just wish there was another one, like a little bit of that in the second and the third act.
Right, because the narration of that, the father's, it stops. It does stop, and you understand why he's getting gold and in the bottoms of tree stalks, and he's getting like silk. I don't care anymore. You already explained that.
Yeah,
it's up on that. We should probably switch topics, I think.
Yeah, it's I mean, this film does this film did have the potential to be quite interesting. I mean, again, the visual style is very interesting, but it's just a lot of these things, and I think some of it, like this discussion of the father, kind of shows a lot of the. I don't even know if it knew exactly what story it wanted to tell, and so it just started saying like, "Ooh, I want this moment, and then I want that moment, and then I want this moment," but none of them really connect in a succinct, sort of coherent way.
It's probably a big pressure to adapt such a popular story in the country, or like the story that everybody knows, and so like the misrepresentation of it will probably be like, you feel weird about misrepresenting it, or like you kind of feel I gotta tell this story in the right way, otherwise it's not doing it justice or whatever. But because of that pressure, I think it's sort of had to suffer in the way that this is not telling the actual story in the right way. Like the actual essence of the story, from what I understand, is like what Torrin said, like maybe it's the connection between you and your loved ones around you are eventually going to die, and like the way that you express your love until the end of your life is, important. If I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I do think
we're all thinking, aren't we?
a little bit. Something to just sort of shift the discussion to something a little bit new. We all said that we did like the first 20 to 25 minutes of the film. Perhaps we can talk about why. So, like, we've talked about a lot of the reasons why we didn't like the first or the last bit, which just, like, at the end just gets cringe-worthy in terms of, like, the melodrama and stuff, and that's part of the reason why I also wasn't fond of it, but... But, like, what were some of the moments that you did like, and why? I guess the big reason is, why did you like those moments?
There is a strength sort of in terms of relating the first bit of the film to the rest of it, is one of the themes of her sort of loss of innocence when she moves to the city. One of the ways that is narrated is like the dichotomy between nature and culture, and that her desire to return to the natural world, the birds and bugs and beasts. That's the refrain that sort of ties her to the earth as opposed to the moon, and that ties her to nature as opposed to the city, and that sort of thing, and ties her to her like very, her grassroots existence with her nuclear family versus this sort of extended system of like patrilineage and like possession that the city embodies in all the suitors and that sort of thing. It's like an extended family too, because she has a supervisor there, and there's a little attendant girl who's actually one of the most important characters, I think, in the film, because just by virtue of being there, and it's this pairing thing that a lot of Studio Ghibli films do with like this little secondary like avatar figure that is a foil, is not a foil, is like an extension. Anyway, so that's not really my point. But one of the things the film does well in the first 20-25 minutes is just like by virtue of its being so absolutely beautiful in the watercolor depictions of the countryside and like their little rustic involvements, little bamboos, like having fun with her friends, sliding down mud banks and that sort of thing, and picking it, getting scrapes on their elbows and that sort of thing, which is great, and finding mushrooms for pheasant stew and that sort of thing. They narrate that really well, and you do feel, you understand completely her nostalgia for that setting when she gets moved to the city, and that's like probably, when they have the garden within the city, that's why the mom, like, I think it's a very feminine symbol, the garden, especially like in like Western sort of medieval lit traditions and that sort of thing. The garden is a symbol of feminine chastity, and the enforcement of those boundaries is often like spoken for, or is a male thing sort of thing, and there's a lot of like anti-establishment stuff in Chaucer that's like, look at, if you try and contain somebody like this, then obviously you're going to have problems, and so like the very system of containment undoes itself sort of thing. And I think we do see those same themes. That was really strong throughout the film, the nature and civilization dichotomy, and it gets displayed through like her connection to the earth versus the moon, and nature versus the city. I think they did that extremely well, and it just has to do with like, you know, their technical capability with the art and the music together.
Yeah, and like,
so I really like that about the first bit.
Yeah, the thing that I, on a much more simplistic level, the reason that I liked a lot of the beginning aspects of it, one is always Studio Ghibli kind of shows you a little bit of magic, but doesn't really explain too much of it, and so you're always kind of curious and like, ooh, you know, what else is going to happen that will, you know, leave me in awe and wonder, and in just in terms of the little children running around and grabbing mushrooms and like chasing down pheasants and stuff like that, all those moments, like usually you're taught in like film school and all that sort of stuff, you're supposed to have a conflict that just is supposed to be like immediate. It's always pushing. The people are, you need to have the audience always asking what happens next. I need to know what happens next. But with that sort of segment, as I think I mentioned it in the review, Studio Ghibli films tend to make you feel safe and just kind of comforted and all that sort of stuff. And I felt like it worked well in this, in the beginning section, because you see children, their biggest issue and their biggest conflict is chasing down a pheasant, or taunting a little child that they don't really, you know, aren't friends with yet, or just, you know, teasing an old man, trying to, you know, give his little child a name or whatever. And these conflicts are so small, yet so they're small, and so they don't create any sort of anxiety in us when we're watching these films, and it does create that sense of like, I'm safe. I have that warm sensation where it's just and nothing's going to sort of, one, bore me, or two, sort of create that, as I said, anxiety of it all, and that gets just cut off right at the head as soon as they go to the city, where it becomes this character has to change into something else. And I thought they had the potential to make it interesting when she she arrives there, and, you know, has to sort of navigate through becoming a princess, noble princess, and being herself. But it just, I don't know, something happens there.
Oh, I was trying to think of the moments that like it starts to go downfall from that from that point. And I think it's around the time where she is either, I don't know, around the time she starts learning all these new things from the teacher, and like she's all jokey to the teacher, but she presents herself as like this noble, like proper lady in front of her parents and all that. Because I did find it very tragic, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a very interesting conflict, because she is very happy about the fact that they moved, like as soon as they arrive, like this gigantic house is hers, and
walk-in closet.
The closet is filled with beautiful stuff, and she's all happy, and I was thinking like, oh, the parents are gonna think that she's happy right now, so like she's happy about the move and all stuff, and so there was gonna be like interesting conflict that's set up, except it does not execute itself properly. But I actually had a massive anxiety in the beginning when I was watching watching them be all happy and stuff, because I knew that the father was going to fall into being a tragic hero, you know, like, because he was all of a sudden bombarded with this gold and all that stuff, that he decides, I'm gonna go build, as soon as he said, I'm gonna go to the city and build a house, I was like, this is gonna go, like...
You know that their happy times are going to end.
Yeah, so I did, there was actually, like, it was nostalgic in the fact that they were so happy, and it was really cute, and all that stuff, but I did have that anxiety, and thinking that this is about to end, somehow, and essentially, like, especially when, Sutemaru Nichan was saying, like, I'm afraid that you're just gonna outgrow us all, and disappear, but I was expecting something different when he said that, but... But so there was that.
Get like 2,000 feet tall.
Yeah, no, I actually was thinking that that's a possibility.
Me too, yeah. Because like Paul said, they do really harp on the fact that, oh my god, how are they going to deal with this really rapid growth? It's like that is the magic element that is emphasized at first. And so you almost do expect that.
So like he was, she was like or like barely walking when he found her. Tsutomaru Nichan found her, and then like eventually she is as big as him, you know. So like that's why I was.
She grew years and days essentially.
Yeah. So and I was like, so okay, so how long is those days? Not very long. Compared to a normal human being, like growing to that big, and then she sort of is like in the same, like they're adults together. She's not like an old lady when she meets him again, which was kind of curious as well. Okay, so I'm getting off topic, but the reason why the first, I'm gonna say until she presents herself as as a proper lady in front of her father, like or in front of the name. Giver. Yeah. Until that moment, it worked very well because there was a conflict that was established, and there was the thing that we were rooting for that we did not want to end, like the nostalgic fact that we did not want to end, and I understood clearly what everybody's motivation was.
I think ultimately, like the film did have some really nice elements to it. But for most of it, I was kind of bored, right? And like some of these parts of why I'm bored is because one, sometimes I just didn't ask the question, oh, what's going to happen next? I'm so afraid, excited, interested. I just about what happens next, and I think part of that issue is just like some magic parts they tried to explain, like where is she from, and some they didn't even bother about like why she stopped growing. And why everyone was just sort of okay with it.
And where did she go after they flew? Like, Tsutomaru Nichan and her flew together. Which, like, is another point. Like, as soon as he was like, we can run away together, I was like, you have a wife and a child.
Well, I thought, like, that was sort of like a weird dream sequence, sort of. Anyways, does anyone...
Two sort of weird dream sequences, too.
Yeah, does anyone have anything that they'd like to bring up, or have we sort of beat...
I don't know, let's talk a bit about the ending, maybe, because... One of the reasons I think it failed was, like, it was rushed straight up, too hastily done, and the writing did not communicate the themes appropriately. And I think that it's an interruptive moment. I was fucking laughing. I'm sorry, I have to swear about that, because, like, the Buddha comes down on a cloud, and it's full of color, and it's like, everything. It's like sort of African rhythms, too. And everybody's having a great time up there after death, it seems. If the moon is a metaphor for death or absence, which it definitely is, and at the same time it is also a moonland. It's a fantasy world. But basically the Buddhist flies down with all the dancers and that sort of thing, and the angels of the moon, and it's a really interruptive moment to the little family triangle of grief that mother, daughter, father are having there, and it's like, oh, why do you want to leave? Like, you did it unconsciously. You called back unconsciously to be taken back to the moon. What could we have done? And it's like, oh, nothing really. I don't know how else you could have acted. And it's just like, oh, we have to lose each other because of the way that we are, I don't know. And it was really interruptive, and sort of like in the laughy but profound way that death sometimes is, I think. And, like, you have to laugh about how quick it comes and what might be on the other side if it's fucking dancing and, acrobatics and candy and parades all the time. And it was hilarious how quickly that moved. But she has, like, 2 sentences where she's like, oh, but I've learned that everybody experiences grief and joy in different shades here on Earth. And, like, all our compassion is meaningful. And then all of a sudden, boom, she's got the thing placed on her. So you never quite get what you never quite get to say what you want to when you leave loved ones, whether it's just like parting for a few years or whether you actually lose somebody, they die. I think that was supposed to communicate that. But I think that the way that it did it, although it was sort of like semi-appropriate, actually had more to do with the writing being rushed than it did with the actual thematic conclusion,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I actually am familiar with that image of the clouds and all the angels of the moon. It has a different name. They're not, like, they're a little different from angels. But anyways, and but as soon as that came down with that music, like that, I think is the only part that music did not work for me. It's
the
like
fade in and the fade out too.
Yeah, yeah, it fades in as to like it comes closer, and it's like everybody sees it too. It's not just her. It's like everybody sees it, which I was okay with, and I actually did, I guess I did cry when she was like parting with her parents, all that stuff, but I didn't feel good about it. and the lady, the angel lady, like puts the cloth on her, and then she looks back at, like, after like they start taking off, she looks back at the world and she has tears in her eyes, but she looks back, which is kind of a hinting at the fact that she's going to turn into that lady that she was talking about earlier, like the lady who sings that song, and she's going to be miserable for the rest of the eternity.
I thought she said that the person, she was happy until she sang that song and she'd be sad. And it was like, that moment was mirrored when the princess was a little kid and she sang that new verse for the first time.
Right, on the edge of the cliff.
And she starts crying, and then the kids are like, yo, why are you crying? And she's like, I don't know, ah ha ha ha, and they just all start laughing and stuff, right? And so like that was sort of mirrored.
But why?
Sort of in a transcendental way, like we return in spirit to ourselves from past lives, and that aspect was brought up there.
Yeah, and
so it was herself?
I don't know.
Could be.
It could be. I guess like she does when she first appears. It's just like full grown person, except in like a baby, like in like a tiny little, and then she turns into a baby. So maybe that's confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing, and I'm sure if we thought about it longer, we'd probably have a better answer for it. But yeah, with the ending, it did seem a little bit rushed, and it was sort of like the Emperor sort of brings up the whole idea of like, okay, now here's a suitor where she just cannot run away, and like, okay, cool. Like, this is sort of a conflict that, like, this is what she's gonna have to fight off. And oh boy, that, the boy from her childhood is totally gonna show up and they're gonna get together and they're gonna, like, be happy ever after. That's what I was kind of hoping for, and, like, I think that's what I realized about, halfway through the second act is, like, I just want that boy to show up so that they can have moments together, but, like, they're briefly brought up in different moments, but otherwise there's just no tension about that at all, which is kind of irritating because she leaves in the first act with the question of, or the boy says, like, you're just going to leave us, and she's like, I'll never leave you, right? So it sets up, here's all this tension, and they other than two very, very brief moments of, in the story that we've talked about already, I don't know. Long story short, they should have just used the Emperor and have him be the most interesting conflict, or actually try and implement this whole moon, like, oh no, I'm going to disappear sort of element at the beginning so that we know that it's sort of a time bomb and that all these moments are important because she's going to lose them at some point. I think that's it for us. We all have issues with the film. Had some nice moments, but not enough. Quickly again, I gave it a C. Torn?
Yeah, I'd have to echo that. C. We, as you can probably tell, we talked a lot about characters' internal conflicts and like psychological dynamics and that sort of thing, and how the themes were not narrated very well, like consistently through the minds of the characters and the perspective shifts and everything like that. And it precluded us talking about other things that were great, the art direction and the music and that sort of thing. And they really, as great as they were seriously hampered by the plot. And so it was definitely a C. No better than that, really. The 100% Rotten Tomatoes bullshit.
Yeah, I
don't believe.
I said it was 89%, but I was looking at the wrong thing. It's 100%, which is just bizarre. And Sue also.
I think overall, it actually surprisingly did get me interested in searching the actual tale of the bamboo cutter, but in the wrong ways. So I would give it no more than 60. I would say like
a C.
I don't know.
For Nathan.
Yeah, C.
Nathan, I'm still trying to keep the great
Nathan.
stuff.
C minus probably.
Alright, so 3 C's.
Yeah, 3 C's. Anyways, again, this was an episode of QQ, Quality Control. My name's Paul Weston. Beside me is Torrin McLaughlin and Suman Park. Hope you see us for the next episode. Thanks, guys.
Bye.